Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Since this is a psychology YouTube channel, keep in mind that everything I say might contain triggering material. I usually try to warn people if something particularly triggering is coming up, but really a lot of the things I talk about could be triggering to individuals. So keep that in mind. Take care of yourself. Let's watch.
Just when I am angry.
Right, but it's like you're like a ticking time bomb. I don't know if maybe next week you're gonna get angry again.
I know, but you know, Debbie, it's life. I mean, I can't promise you that I will not be angry again. You get angry sometimes too.
Yikes. So Osama's apology and his attempt to get Debbie back is to say, I don't know if I included the bit where he was saying, look, when I get angry, I say a lot of strange things, and you just have to ignore it. So just ignore me when I'm angry, and then once I calm down, everything will be fine. And so, okay. And then he says, but I get angry sometimes. I'm just going to get angry sometimes. You're just going to have to live with it. What? That's your apology? That's your attempt to win her back? Yikes.
So it's our nature.
But it seems like
Yes, it is your nature, all of our nature, to feel angry, to maybe even exhibit anger. But it is not within our nature to do what he did and to be openly hostile and mean and rejecting and hurtful. That's not within our nature.
excuse. You say, oh, I'm angry, and you got to forget about it. But it hurts so bad what you said.
And Debbie's been very healthy throughout this. We haven't seen her in this situation, so I was curious what she would do. But she's focusing on her feelings, on how it hurts, on the foundation of the feelings. You always hear me talk about the primary feelings, the basis of our emotions, which in relationships is often fear or hurt, if not all the time. And so she's focusing on that and not going beyond that, right? Which is, very healthy and gives him a chance to rise to the occasion. Let's see if he does.
His lies and his hidden agenda. I don't know how he could right all the wrongs he has done to me.
Be truthful and honest with me, Osama. Please, I need this. Why didn't you tell me the first night that you had a different...
This is good. And his body language is off-putting, and she is asking a really great question here. That's a very good thing to focus on. If he has a viable answer to this, or an apologetic answer, or a compassionate answer, something like, I didn't want to lose you, and I'm so sorry because I basically lied by omission, or I went into denial, something like that. It wouldn't excuse it, but it would provide some context. But I'm guessing we're not going to get that.
plan for both of us. You should have said something to me, Osama.
No matter what I always said now. It's too late.
Wait, so he's just meeting up with her to finalize the breakup? Because if that's the case, then yeah, he's doing a great job. But that's not what he said leading up to this meeting. He was trying to win her back. So, yeesh. So what's going on with this guy? Is he a con artist? Is he... Because when he was talking to his sister, he exhibited a little bit more self-awareness or humanity. Maybe he is entering that zone right now again where he feels pressured or something and he gets angry because of that. Because he's coming off similar to the way he did when he was being very upsetting. So I'm just trying to figure out what's going on with him. Does he just not care? Is he that awkward? I mean, because I could see a world in which all of this is a result of him just being awkward. Awkward we often associate with other kinds of things like being verbally clumsy at a restaurant or something. But you can be awkward if you're ever with someone who is awkward or you are awkward yourself. You know that it can manifest like this in conflict where you get jumbled up in your head. You don't know what to say. You don't really know how you're feeling. You're very upset and distressed on the inside, and you just kind of freaking out. You don't know what to say, and you say weird things as a way of trying to manage or something. And so sometimes, awkwardness can look like that too. And is that what we're seeing, or is he an abusive in general person? Is he, because that's what an abusive person would say. That's what someone, that's often what they will say is like, look, I get abusive, and not they wouldn't use that word, but I get angry. It's natural. And that happens. You're just going to have to ignore me, and there's no solution other than you just have to put up with it. That's what abusive people say.
Oh, baby, you always think like this. What was our plan? Is you will come here and make our documents, and after go to the US and live there.
Instead of make documents, we were supposed to come here to get married, but you're talking documents and papers. It's like marriage is a whole special thing.
Let me talk, okay?
Okay.
Our plan was that you will come here.
And we're also seeing some signs of abuse as well, that when she's talking, because that's what you do in conversations, he wants to establish that she not talk. I don't know if you caught that. Let's rewind that.
Here to get married, but you're talking documents and papers. It's like marriage is a whole special thing.
Let me talk, okay?
So you could hear it kind of, because in the mix, because on the recording, they have both tracks, right? They have his lapel mic and hers, and they brought his down. So he was trying to interrupt her. He was trying to get her to stop talking. And the body language thing, it's yikes.
Okay.
Our plan was that you will come here, and after we go to the US.
Yeah, but in the future, like next year, you can come and visit my kids and come back.
You see, this is the mistake you did, because this wasn't our plan.
So on one hand, it's still in that zone, but we don't know the arrangement that they had, and we don't know the way they communicated about it. I tend to believe that Debbie is speaking, at least her understanding. It sounds like her understanding was that she would come over, they would get married, and it was about the marriage. It wasn't about necessarily even where they lived. And then they would go back to the States occasionally or something, or maybe in the future think about moving to the States or something like that. But it's possible that she communicated it in a very obscure way, or as a lot of these couples, they literally barely talk about these things and they just make up a fantasy in their mind, and then they realize that their fantasies were different. So it's also possible that she did go into denial or actively deceive or something. But I'm going to take a guess and say that Oussama's understanding of the arrangement is not necessarily based on a lot of solid communication. The way that Oussama is, it seems more likely that Oussama stretched the data to fit what he wanted more than she did.
You're making everything about a visa. I'm making everything about a life. Your mind is like this.
Yeah.
You can't see.
Yeah, and if he wants to make a living as a poet and an artist and a painter, and God bless him for trying this, you don't have to live in the States. The way that people operate today, it's all online, right? Now, maybe there's some benefit to living in the States. Maybe there's even some sort of legal thing in Morocco, or some sort of, I don't know, maybe there's some kind of thing there, like the shipping situation in Morocco isn't as good in the States. So, maybe there's something like that, because, if you ship a painting, anyway. But I could see him, given his limited understanding, seemingly, of how the world works, that he believes that going to the States is it's like some sort of Garden of Eden for poets and for making a living as a painter. And not only is it common for people to think stuff like that, but also we see on this show that people will have a very distorted view of what it's like to actually live in the United States. They see certain things from social media and media about Americans and what it's like and how much you earn at a particular job or something like that. And they aren't shown, or they don't know to emphasize, or they don't know to ask the questions to illuminate what it's actually like ground level, day to day, minute to minute in the United States. Because, it's not all great, obviously. So it's interesting. So maybe it is that. But yeah, you would think that if Oussama was both interested in living in the States, which is fine, and he really loves Debbie, then the tone of this conversation would be a lot different, right?
Like this. But see, you didn't talk about the marriage.
We talk about the plan. Why you mix these things with these things?
He's done this before, where it's almost like Osama is trying to act like an adult or some sort of masculine male. The way he holds himself, the way he talks, it's like, I am analytical and logical. And I've seen this before in my office, and I don't go after it immediately. People do this because they're insecure. That's why. So, but it needs to stop for both people's sake. I mean, obviously for the Debbie of the world, but for him. I mean, this isn't helping him. And if he's insecure and he's, at least half of his efforts right now are trying to avoid humiliation, then that deprives your brain of the opportunity to fully comprehend what's happening right now and address it head on. So, do you know what I mean? Do you detect it too? He does this kind of mannerism of like, this is the way a logical, respectable, masculine male talks with authority.
Because the most important thing and the most sacred thing is marriage and love. That's the first thing. That's the foundation. Love can conquer anything.
Now, it's possible that for Osama and his community that the mainstream American view of marriage and love is really quite different. We understand that it's often not talked about on these shows. But for some people in some communities, love is great, but survival is more important, and building a life and building a good life for your children or sending money back to your family is a lot more important than the kind of love that mainstream Americans might value and prioritize. So maybe something like that is going on.
But you don't have enough strong love for me to accomplish a life here, so you never had unconditional love for me, and I'm glad to know that now.
You never believe in my love.
I did believe.
Well, it's a weird statement, and you're not helping her to believe in your love by saying such things.
Believe in your love. What do you think made me come all the way to Morocco and move?
No.
Because of your love, I believed in you.
I loved you, but you didn't accept this.
Your love is
So it's hard to match up the abusive profile with Osama, but I just want to point out that that's what abusive people will say sometimes. And just because someone has the signs doesn't mean that they are abusive, but the theme of this video anyway is looking at that. So abusive people will often say, either because they believe it, because of their own weird awarenesses and paradigms, or they will say it as a way of trying to win an argument and they don't really believe it themselves. They will have these very definitive statements that will put the victim on the defensive. They will say things that will, unless you know as a victim what's happening, you will feel very compelled to convinced, so to use this as an example, and there are millions of examples that I could come up with, but this can manifest in a lot of different ways, but this is a common one anyway, where he's like, you never really loved me, is essentially what he's saying. You didn't believe in my love for you, that's what he's saying. So you didn't love me enough to believe in my love for you, or something like that. Anyway, but verbatim what he's saying is, you never believed in my love for you. So then that now puts her on the defensive. Now she has to prove to him that that's wrong, and she's giving really good data. I moved out here to marry you, so obviously I believed in your love of me. And if he were truly in a conversation, then he would say, oh, okay, yeah, I guess you're right. Maybe I should modify that. I just wish that you would believe in my love for you now, or something like that. But abusive people, and maybe people in general in conflict like this, they're not really interested in having a conversation. They're interested in winning. And so, but if we're sticking to the abusive profile, they are hoping that you will, as the victim, become off kilter, and it will be a smokescreen right away from what you were talking about earlier. You never loved me was the original thing, or you don't love me unconditionally. And for people in general, and also for abusive people, to have that something like that said to them, that means that there's something wrong with them. There's something wrong with the way that they love, essentially. There's an accusation there, criticism, and they can't have that. They have to establish superiority. They're always logical. They're always winning. And so you have to somehow put the other person off kilter. And so you say something like that, and now Debbie's no longer talking about how he doesn't love unconditionally. But I think she's smart enough to be able to kind of get back there. We kind of saw this if you watched Ultimatum with me with Tiff and Mildred. During the reunion, there was this thing that was brought up, and then Mildred actually brought it up herself about the police being called, and then very quickly started going in all these other directions of that tripped Tiff up, of like the sex toy being in the mail, and you called me a bad parent many times, and you were the abusive one. And then Tiff is on their back, on their heels, and trying to defend, and and then overwhelmed, and then eventually Tiff runs away, right? Because it was very distressing, naturally. And mission accomplished if you're Mildred, because you effectively avoided confronting what happened, which is that you had the police called on you, and you were charged or arrested or something with a domestic violence charge, I think. I don't know that for sure, but Mildred herself basically was saying that the police were accusing her of being the aggressor. So you effectively got away from that conversation by throwing all that stuff out there. And I'm saying all this so that, one, you know not to do that yourself. Even non-abusive people will do this. When you're in a discussion like this and you get accused of something, almost universally people will do another accusation. Like, hey, you yesterday you didn't consider my feelings. Well, you never consider my feelings too. People do that all the time. It's not helpful. So, even if the accusation isn't true, just address it, talk it out, one thing at a time. And a big part of my work with couples involved that, because they would naturally have those conversations in my office, and I would say, one thing at a time. And so it was a very frequent refrain, and I almost was like training the couples. And I always knew I was succeeding on that front when in the middle of the session, they'd start to do that. Or more commonly, what would happen is I know I would have begun to succeed when the individual, so they're being criticized for something, or something's being brought up to them, and the person has an impulse to do that, like, well, you never, but I've been confronted on that enough times, or pointed out compassionately by my therapist, Kirk, and so don't do that. But what they'll do often is they'll say, okay, so I know you're gonna, looking at me, I know you're not gonna want me to say this, but it really needs to be said, and then they say it. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, at least we're moving down the road, right? Because at least I've introduced it and interrupt. You're circumventing the interrupt, but it's a step in the right direction. Anyway, so everyone does that. But another angle to look at this is if you're ever a victim and you are trying to address something that is very important, and if you don't know what's happening, you can be victimized or smokescreened by this tactic. And people will do this in debate. Political debates will look like this sometimes, not necessarily in that exact way, but this avoidance of the foundation of the conversation by throwing out all these red herrings, and then because one person is not viably or isn't honestly in the conversation, whereas the other person is. So right now, the way it looks, Osama isn't actually interested in having this conversation in a way that is a meeting of the minds or an apology or understanding. He wants to win. He wants to get her off kilter. She's actually trying to have a conversation, right? But I'm guessing she'll be able to bring it back. All right, well, we'll be having our 15th anniversary live show on YouTube on September 16th and 17th, 2023. We will be broadcasting for 15 hours in 7.5-hour chunks on each day. So join us there. Also, if you want to send us any kind of package or card or fan art is always the best thing you can send that I like. Any sort of that thing like that is great. And if you do send fan art, if you could include the other co-hosts, Stacy, Umberto, Bob, Rebecca, others, or maybe even yourself within a scene with us or something, or watching the show, that would be great as well. Also, if you could sign it somehow, because sometimes I'll have someone's fan art and I'll forget who made it because I'm not great at cataloging that. So sometimes I want to just see, so you just have like your name at the bottom. Obviously that helps. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.